Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna, Dharam Pradam Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Please accept our humble obeisances, Prabhuji. And once again, we are very, very fortunate, Prabhu, and very grateful to you, Prabhuji, for your association. And we are greatly benefited, Prabhu. Almost every fortnightly, we are getting your association. And it's helping all of us here in our study of Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. So for the sake of new devotee, Prabhu, quickly I'll introduce you and then we can start the session, Prabhuji. So Hare Krishna, welcome all the devotees. Still devotees are tuning in. And we are very, very fortunate to have with us today His Grace Mukunda to Prabhu. And Prabhuji has been serving this mission for last more than 4 decades. Disciple of His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. And he has been rendering various services in different capacities. He's also very well known for his wonderful, very melodious kirtan. And apart from that, he is a well-known scholar of Sanskrit, Hindi, and other Indic languages. And currently, he also serves as a Sanskrit and English translator and editor for the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, BBT. He served as a member of Shastric Advisory Council to the ISKCON Governing Body Commission, GBC. And also, he traveled widely, lecturing for many years on Vedic literature such as Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. And all of us, we are very fortunate here in Kanyadesh. We are very frequently we are getting Prabhuji association, especially on Srimad Bhagavatam. And we can see that how Prabhuji classes are so deeply and based on the commentary of the previous acharyas. And all of us, we are greatly benefited by Prabhuji's association. So let's together welcome Prabhu by chanting one time Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. His Grace Mukunda Prabhu ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya ivasya paritanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you once again for the opportunity to say a few words in glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam and for your very kind introduction. Tonight we'll speak on Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 8, texts 32 through 36, Kunti Stava. And we'll begin as always with Mangalacharana. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya. Naram Shaiva Narottamam. Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet. Nashta Praishwa Bhadreshu. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke. Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Krishne Swadhamo Bhagate. Dharmajnanadiphisaha. Kalau Nashtadrishamesha. Uranarko Dhunoditaha. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Chapter 8, text 32. Kechid ahurajam jatam punyashlokasya kirtaye yadoho priyasyanavavye anvavaye malayasyeva chandanam. Some say that the unborn is born for the glorification of pious kings, and others say that he's born to please King Yadu, one of your dearest devotees. You appear in his family as sandalwood appears in the Malaya hills. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Because the Lord's appearance in this material world is bewildering, there are different opinions about the birth of the unborn. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he takes his birth here in the material world, although he is the Lord of all creations and he is unborn. Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakayat Chakshurun Miritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Utapatakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye. Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodatao Gaudodayo Pushpavantao Shando Chitro Tamodadao Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Madgavira pi Gopala Swikuryat Kripaya Yadi Tadaiva Asam Payaha Pitva Krishayus Tat Priyajanaha. Here Kunti Devi is emphasizing the appearance and activities of the Lord, which are always bewildering. In these 4 or 5 verses, Kunti lists some of the reasons that people say the Lord appears. And Ajam Jatam is one of these ironies that we come across throughout the Vedic literatures. This is one of the things she's focusing on. But Srila Prabhupada in his purport, he says in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he takes his birth in the material world, although he's the Lord of all creations and he's unborn. That sounds to me like chapter 4, text 6. Ajopi san avyayatma bhutanam ishwaropi san prakatim swam adhishtaya sambhavami atmamayaya. Although I am unborn, my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, by my internal energy I appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. So Srila Prabhupada continues his purport, there cannot be any denial of the birth of the unborn, because he himself establishes the truth. What truth is that? The truth that he takes birth in this material world. Still, there are different opinions as to why he takes his birth. That is also declared in the Bhagavad Gita. He appears by his own internal potency to reestablish the principles in religion and to protect the pious and to annihilate the impious. We all know this famous group of verses. Yada yada hi dharmasya ityadi. That is the mission of the appearance of the unborn. Still, it is said that the Lord is there to glorify the pious king, Yudhishthira. Lord Sri Krishna certainly wanted to establish the kingdom of the Pandavas for the good of all in the world. When there is a pious king ruling over the world, the people are happy. When the ruler is impious, the people are unhappy. We're all unhappy. There's no way around it. Part of that unhappiness is the fact that we have unqualified leaders. Another part of that unhappiness is the fact that this material world is by nature unhappy because we actually don't belong here. We don't have any legitimate business here. Therefore, we're not happy when we're here. We don't belong here. So material existence itself is actually illegitimate. This is something Prabhupada says here in this passage when he's explaining. But if you have a pious ruler, then it makes things a little bit smoother. It's as good as it can be, or as Prabhupada is fond of saying, it makes the best use of a bad bargain. So he's emphasizing this point. In the age of Kali, in most cases, the rulers are impious, and therefore the citizens are also continuously unhappy. But in the case of democracy, the impious citizens themselves elect their representative to rule over them, and therefore they cannot blame anyone for their unhappiness. Now he's shifting gears. He says, Maharaj Nala was also celebrated as a great pious king, but he had no connection with Lord Krishna. Therefore, Maharaj Yudhishthira is meant here to be glorified by Krishna. He had also glorified King Yadu, having taken his birth in the family. He is known as Yadava, Yaduvira, Yadunandana, etc. Although the Lord is always independent of such obligation. He's just like the sandalwood that grows in the Malaya hills. Trees can grow anywhere and everywhere, yet because the sandalwood trees grow mostly in the area of the Malaya hills, the name sandalwood and the Malaya hills are interrelated. Therefore, the conclusion is that the Lord is ever unborn, like the sun, and yet he appears as the sun rises on the eastern horizon. As the sun is never the sun of the eastern horizon, so the Lord is no one's son, but he is the father of everything that be. Sridhar Swami, in his commentary on this verse, says, since your birth, etc., are so difficult to fathom and bewilder the universe, they describe these variously, as in these 4 verses beginning with this one. When he says, for the glorification of Punya Shloka Syakirtaye, that Punya Shloka, who is it? It's King Yudhishthira, according to Sridhar Swami. Or to the Yadus, plural Yadus. Or Yadu, Maharaj himself. So, for the glorification in the dynasty, it's like the sandalwood in Malaya. Malayasya kirtaye vamshe chandanam yatha. Where is the Malaya? Where is the Malaya hills? Anybody know? Oh, Braj Prakash?
No, Prabhu.
I think it means Agastya Malay.
Oh, okay.
In South India. But according to some, it can also be Malaysia. Malaysia, they're growing rubber more now than sandalwood. But anyway, as Prabhupada said, sandalwood trees can grow anywhere, but they're famous in this Malaya hills. Krama Sandarbha of Jiva Goswami, Kechid iti Chatushkam. He simply says, beginning with this verse, there are 4 verses on the same topic, all different theories as to why the Lord appears. That's all he says. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur fills it out. He says, if you are not to appear in this world, then how would we be able to relish your enchanting pastimes? Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur injects the principle of Yoga Maya, or rather Hladini Shakti, into this discussion. There are many opinions about the cause of your appearance. And then he says again, like Sridhar Swami, Punya Shloka here refers to Yudhishthira, since he was famous by that name at that time. And then he quotes half a verse. Punya Shloko Nalo Raja, Punya Shloko Yudhishthiraha. They're both known as Punya Shloka. But only one of those Rajas is actually a devotee of Krishna, therefore it has to be Yudhishthira. That's his logic. But he allows that Punya Shloka can mean King Nala. So again, you appeared in the Yadu dynasty to glorify dear Yudhishthira. Or the sentence can mean that you appeared in that dynasty to glorify the famous King Yadu. Now, Ajam Jatam, we mentioned already. This is something that Kunti Devi has mentioned already in text 30, this irony. Although you're born, you're not born. How is it possible? Vishwanath Chakravarti therein explains in the same vein as he's doing now, that all this kind of irony that we see, you're unborn, but you're not unborn. You're partial to your devotees, but you're equal to all. You appear to be an ordinary human being, but you're the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is all tantamount to extreme deception. Tadatyanta vidambanam. These are Kunti's words. It means extreme deception. For example, the Supreme Lord becomes a genuine, real live boar. How is it possible? So he explains, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, when the Lord actually becomes a boar, Varahadev, or as Kunti Devi herself gives the example in the previous verse, Gopiyadade, Tvai Kirtagasi Damatavad, you become just like an ordinary child who's frightened after stealing. And she says, I can't understand this. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, this better allows the devotees to relish the Lord's pastimes, but they do remain truly contradictory. Therefore, who can understand them? This is the whole point of Kunti Devi's diversion here, if you will. She's pointing out so many people have so many different opinions. Who can prove how the Lord appears? This is why she spoke that verse. She said, as far as I'm concerned, I'm bewildered. That's it. Samam vimohayati. Bhirapiyad bipeti. You're afraid of your mother, genuinely afraid. They're not crocodile tears, but fear itself is afraid of you. Who can reconcile this? Not me. This is her attitude. So that's text number 32. Just a few comments. 33. Apare vasudevasya devakyam yachito bhyagat ajastvam asya kshemaya vadhaya chasuradvisham. Suradvisham vadhaya. So he comes here to destroy those who are envious of the godly. And kshemaya, asya kshemaya. The question is raised in the commentaries. Asya kshemaya. Who is asya? Who's kshemaya? Whose welfare are you here to effect? We'll answer that in a moment. Translation. Others say that since both Vasudeva and Devaki prayed for you, you've taken your birth as their son. Undoubtedly, you are unborn, yet you take your birth for their welfare and to kill those who are envious of the demigods. So here Srila Prabhupada is taking it that they have appeared for the welfare of Devaki and her husband, who happened to be Kunti's brother, remember. That's why Kunti would mention this. Their family. So, purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, it is also said that Vasudeva and Devaki in their previous birth as Sutapa and Prishni underwent a severe type of penance to get the Lord as their son. And as a result of such austerities, the Lord appeared as their son. Such austerities. What such austerities? How long did they perform penance? Does anybody know? 12,000 celestial years. That is 12,000 years by the demigods' calculation. My friends, that is a long, long, long time. And they were doing this as householders, very strictly following all the principles and no sense gratification and meditating and praying hard that the Lord can come to them as their son. They wanted him in this mood. Srila Prabhupada continues. It is already declared in the Bhagavad Gita that the Lord appears for the welfare of all the people of the world. Underline that, for the welfare of all people of the world. And to vanquish the asuras, or the materialistic atheists. We've already quoted that verse. Why did Srila Prabhupada add this second phrase, for the welfare of all the world? Let's see. Sridhar Swami might tell us. He says, so you, the unborn one, went to Devaki, wife of Vasudeva. Here, the understanding to be supplied is that putratvam iti shesha. You became their son. That's indirect way of saying it. It's described that the demigods, they appreciate language that is indirect. So the easier reading would be arbhatvam. You became their child. After all, that was requested by both of them in their previous forms as Sutapa and Prishni. Here there's a third person verb, abhyagat, And that is just poetic license. Vishwanath Chakravarti tells us. But the word asya here, since it's vague, asya just means of that. Of what? Or of whom? The word asya here implies for the welfare, kshemaya, of the universe, the whole world. Jagat kalyan ke liye, bhavanaye. Dargaji Goswami, again, he makes no comment. Same thing. Pratama Purushas Tvarshaha, Arvatwamiti Patha Sugamaha, Tabhyam eva Purvam Sutavat Prishni Rupabhyam Yachitaha San, Asya Jagataha Kshemaya. It's exactly the same. You are unborn, but you came as the son of Vasudeva, etc., etc. Are you all hearing me? Because I'm getting messages that the internet is unstable. So give me some feedback if you're all.
Yes, Prabhu, we can hear you, Prabhuji.
Okay, so we're connected. All right, so Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur basically says the same thing as Sridhar Swami there. In text 34, Bharavataranyanye bhuvo nava iva udathao Sidantya bhuri bharena jato hi atma bhuvarthitaha. This is the third opinion. Actually, it's more than three now, I think. 4 or 5 opinions. Others say that the world being overburdened like a boat at sea. If you've ever taken a boat and crossed the ocean on a boat, you may have some idea what this is like. Srila Prabhupada had to take a boat, and he said there were 30-foot swells. Can you imagine that? Boats are sometimes, especially in the Atlantic Ocean, they're tossed about like matchsticks. Sometimes they even sink, although generally they're built to withstand that. So this world is like that, especially now, it seems, within the last few years. Really overburdened. Something's got to give here, it seems. Everyone is saying this. Or if they're not saying this, it's obvious anyway. But here Kunti Devi says that some people say that when the world is overburdened, being that much aggrieved, then Brahma, who is your son after all, he prayed for you, and so you've appeared to diminish the trouble. Atma Bhuva Arthitha. You were prayed for by Atma Bhu. Atma Bhu means Lord Brahma. Why Atma Bhu? Let's hear Srila Prabhupada. Purport. Brahma, or the first living being born just after the creation, is the direct son of Narayana. Narayana, as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, first of all entered the material universe. Without spiritual contact, matter cannot create. This principle was followed from the very beginning of creation. The Supreme Spirit entered the universe, and the first living being, Brahma, was born on the lotus flower, grown out of the transcendental abdomen of Lord Vishnu. Vishnu is therefore known as Padmanabha. If you go to Tiruvananthapuram in Kerala, you will see Ananta Padmanabha Swami or Ananta Shayana Swami. Big, maybe 10, 12-foot long Lord Vishnu lying on Ananta Shesh. And from his navel is coming the lotus flower, which is the birthplace of Lord Brahma. Therefore, Lord Brahma is called Atmabhu. Brahma is known as Atmabhu because he was begotten directly from the father without any contact of Mother Lakshmi Ji. Lakshmi Ji was present near Narayana, engaged in the service of the Lord, and still without contact with Lakshmi Ji, Narayana begot Brahma. That is the omnipotency of the Lord. One who foolishly considers Narayana like other living beings should take a lesson from this. Narayana is not an ordinary living being. He is the personality of God himself, and he has all the potencies of all the senses in all the parts of his transcendental body. Where is that confirmed? Brahma Samhita. Angani yasya sakalendriya vrittimanti. Very clear. An ordinary living being begets a child by sexual intercourse, and he has no other means to beget a child other than the one designed for him. Who designed it? Did you design it? Now they're having designer babies. At least they're planning like that. We don't really know what they're doing in private laboratories across the world. But this is the normal course of action for someone who wants a son. But when Narayan wants a son, not necessary. He's independent. Abhignya Swarat. Narayan, being omnipotent, is not bound to any condition of energy. He is complete and independent to do anything and everything by his various potencies, very easily and perfectly. This is from Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Natasya karyam karanam cha vidyate, natat samaschabhyadikascha drishyate, parasya shaktira vividhaiva shruyate, swabhaviki jnana bala kriyacha. He has all these things, jnana, bala, kriya, and they're at his beck and call. So he can do anything. Brahma is therefore directly the son of the Father and was not put into the womb of any mother. Therefore, he is known as Atma Bhu, born directly from the Supreme Spirit, Atma, Narayana. This Brahma is in charge of further creations in the universe, because there are two levels of creation, remember? One, Lord Vishnu glances and injects all the living entities into material nature. Two, Lord Brahma engineers everything to make sure that they all get their desires fulfilled. In this way, the Upanishads tell us, Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadhati Kaman. The one supreme living being is fulfilling all the desires of all the other non-supreme living beings. We are all non-supreme living beings. We're spirit, we're eternal, we're just like Narayan in that way, but we cannot beget children without agency of a mother because we don't have that potency. We're tiny. So, Atmabhu. This Brahma is in charge of further creations in the universe, secondarily reflected by the potency of the omnipotent. Within the halo of the universe, there is a transcendental planet known as Shvetadvipa, the White Island, which is the abode of Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, the Paramatma feature of the Supreme Lord. Whenever there is trouble in the universe that cannot be solved by the administrative demigods, they approach Brahmaji for a solution. And if it is not to be solved even by Brahmaji, then Brahmaji consults and prays to Kshirodakashayi Vishnu for an incarnation and solution to the problems. When we have problems, go to Krishna. There's nothing he cannot solve. The real problem is that we have problems because we don't go to Krishna. We're running away from Krishna. That's what causes our problems. And when we realize that we have problems, we still don't go to Krishna. We go to someone else or something else. So the demigods are above that. They're more intelligent. Certainly Brahmaji is above that. So nonetheless, such a problem arose when Kamsa and others were ruling over the earth, and the earth became too much overburdened by the misdeeds of the Asuras. We think it's bad now. Just see what happens when the Asuras take over all the demigods even. Just like the Communist Party of China wants to take over the world. That's very small time. Kamsa, Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, they were able to conquer all the Devatas even, and have the Devatas working for them. What to speak of the United States government? So Brahmaji, along with other demigods, prayed at the shore of the Kshirodaka ocean. And when they were advised of the descent of Krishna as the son of Vasudeva and Devaki. So some people say that the Lord appeared because of the prayers of Brahmaji. It's logical because Brahma is actually a great devotee. And in fact, he's the head of our Sampradaya. So this is another one of the opinions that Kunti Devi has shared. Sridhar Swami's comments, it's brief. Atmabhuveti Brahma Prarthanasya Pradhanya Vivakshaya. Atmabhuva, from the prayers from Brahma, primarily means that, because Brahma made his case before the Lord, therefore the Lord came. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur adds, another opinion is that you appeared mainly because of Brahma's request. Same thing. All right, so let's move on. I'm saving time, not only for questions, but for text 36, which is very deep. Actually, 35 and 6 are both very deep. Bhavesmin klishyamananam avidya kama karamabhi shravana smaranarthani karishyaniti kechana. So some say, yet others say, that you appeared for the sake of rejuvenating the devotional service of hearing, remembering, worshiping, and so on, in order that the conditioned souls suffering from material pangs might take advantage and gain liberation. They might take advantage. You give them the opportunity. They don't always take advantage, but they might. And therefore, we're instructed by our Guru Janas, shed gallons of your own blood to deliver even one other person who may or may not take it in the end. Preaching in America, for example, where I'm from, it takes 20 years to turn someone into a human being. And at that point, they decide whether they really want to persevere in Krishna consciousness. It doesn't really matter if they're twice initiated or even if they're leaders. If one is not a human being, he can't take to Krishna consciousness. And humanity is defined by adherence to samskaras and sadharana dharma, ordinary dharma, mundane dharma. That is what it means to be a human being. Without that, you can hardly embrace Krishna consciousness in principle. Therefore, your behavior will be erratic in Krishna consciousness, unstable. That is called in a word, bhakti abhas. Bhakti abhas. It's a semblance of bhakti, not probate bhakti, I call it. You have a sponsor, and by his divine grace only, you can do something that may be accepted by the Lord or his representatives, most likely. Otherwise, you can't really engage in devotional service, do not have the adhikar. This is our state. At least it's my state. So, Krishna comes, Kunti Devi concludes here, for the sake of rejuvenating this devotional process of hearing, remembering, worshiping, and so on. Because we're suffering from material pangs, and we might take advantage and gain liberation. Go back home. Purport, very nice purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Lord asserts that He appears in every millennium just to reestablish the way of religion. In case you haven't noticed, this is like the third time within this short passage of 4 or 5 verses that Srila Prabhupada has paraphrased the same verse from chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita. If you haven't learned it yet, that's a hint. Prabhupada continues, the way of religion is made by the Supreme Lord. No one can manufacture a new path of religion, as is the fashion for certain ambitious persons. Here he's paraphrasing Canto 6, Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam ityadi. That section in which the Vishnu Dutas are discussing with the Yamadutas what is the actual path of religion. And the conclusion is that only God can dictate what is religion. We can't do that. In the 16th century, Emperor Akbar, bless his heart, he invented a new religion, Din-i-Ilahi. And not surprisingly, the head of state was the head of the religion. That's very convenient arrangement. Henry VIII did the same thing, I'm told, in the United Kingdom. But nobody can do that, actually. You have to repeat. Purvaihi purvataram kratam guru karnamaiva. Krishna tells us in chapter 3, just do your duty according to what your predecessors have done before you. And Manu Samhita also confirms this principle. It is the default principle. If there's ever any disagreement about what is religion, what is not religion, the default solution, Manu says, for those who follow Manu, do whatever your predecessors did, your forefathers and your previous acharyas. Whatever they understood and practiced as dharma, you should do the same thing. Do not try to concoct. This is the American disease, Srila Prabhupada said. The Americans are particularly susceptible to this. That's why there's so much friction. So, the factual way of religion is to accept the Lord as the supreme authority. Underline that term, supreme authority, and thus render service unto him in spontaneous love. We're attracted to the principle, or to the notion, at least, of spontaneous love. But are we attracted to accept the Lord as the supreme authority? Both things have to be there. You cannot have raga without vaidhi. One of them involves law, rules, surrender. And the other one is love, bliss, spontaneity. They're both important. But that is the way of religion. A living being cannot help but render service because he is constitutionally made for that purpose. The only function of the living being is to render service to the Lord. The Lord is great, and the living entities are subordinate to him. Therefore, the duty of the living being is just to serve him only. Unfortunately, the illusioned living beings, out of misunderstanding only, become servants of the senses by material desire. This desire is called avidya, or nescience. And out of such illegitimate desire, remember we mentioned that word before, out of such illegitimate desire, the living being makes different plans for material enjoyment centered around a perverted sex life. He therefore becomes entangled in the chain of birth and death by transmigrating into different bodies on different planets under the direction of the Supreme Lord. How much meaning can you put into a few sentences? This one purport alone is good for the entire hour. We have to move on, so I'll continue reading. Unless, therefore, one is beyond the boundary of this nescience, one cannot get free from the threefold miseries of material life. That is the law of nature. The Lord, however, out of his causeless mercy, because he is more merciful to the suffering living beings than they can expect, appears before them and renovates the principles of devotional service comprised of hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshiping, praying, cooperating, and surrendering unto him. Adoption of all the above mentioned items, or any one of them, can help a conditioned soul get out of the tangle of nescience and thus become liberated from all material sufferings created by the living being, illusioned by the external energy. This particular type of mercy is bestowed upon the living being by the Lord in the form of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Some strong words here. You notice that Srila Prabhupada is accusatory He's directly accusing us of being perverts. Use that word. And having illegitimate lives. Various acharyas are explaining this now. Sridhar Swami begins, he says very nicely, first there is ignorance of one's intrinsic spiritual bliss. From that ignorance, there's on account of misidentification of the body as the body or mind and so on, we have desires. In other words, on account of our false ego, we're blessed with a false ego on account of our ignorance. And on account of that false ego, then we have so many desires that are actually extrinsic and superfluous, unnecessary. And to fulfill our desires, we engage in material activities, but there are so many troubles that ensue from those activities. It is to dispel all this that one has to come to perform the activities of hearing and chanting and so forth, and that is why the Lord comes. This is Sridhar Swami's contribution to this verse. Very pithy, very meaningful. He says, Paramananda Surupa Jnanam Avidya Tato Dehadi Abhimanat Kamas Tataha Karmani Taihi Klishyamananam Tamnevrittaye Shravanadi Arthani Karmani Krishyan. Very nicely stated. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says more or less the same thing. Swamatam aha. Here she's speaking the real thing, her actual opinion. He says, this is the real reason for the Lord's appearance. First, there is ignorance, avidya, and then desire, kama, and then action, karma. Shall I read the verse again, just to remind you why they're talking about these three things? Avidya, kama, karma. It's a nexus. It's a continuum, beginning with avidya, eternal ignorance, and then so many desires to exploit the Lord's property while evading his authority, and then karma. We get bound up in the reactions, and that is inevitably involves suffering. It's unavoidable. So, this is Kunti Devi's conclusion. You might recall she said this back in text 20 as well. Bhakti Yoga Vidhanartham. It is to establish this Bhakti Yoga that the Lord comes here. So she's not really saying anything new here. Swamatamaha, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says. This is her real opinion. So, you come to engage those who are suffering due to actions arising from material desires, which are due only to ignorance. And the real actions are meant for attaining prema. The destruction of suffering is incidental because it's stated in the next verse that the result of hearing about the Lord is seeing the lotus feet of the Lord. By seeing the Lord, one attains prema. So this is the real fruit. Text 36. Shrinvanti gayanti grananti abhikshnashah smaranti nandanti tavehitam janaha ta eva pashyanti acharena tavakam bhava pravaho paramam padam bhujam. Lotus feet. O Krishna, those who continuously hear, chant, and repeat your transcendental activities, or take pleasure in others doing so, certainly see your lotus feet, which alone can stop the repetition of birth and death. Purport by Srila Prabhupada, the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna cannot be seen by our present conditional vision. In order to see him, one has to change his present vision by developing a different condition of life, full of spontaneous love of Godhead. When Sri Krishna was personally present on the face of the globe, not everyone could see him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. materialists like Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, Kamsa, Jarasandha, and Shishupal were highly qualified personalities by acquisition of material assets, but they were unable to appreciate the presence of the Lord. Therefore, even though the Lord may be present before our eyes, it is not possible to see him unless we have the necessary vision. Remember in Bhagavad Gita, Divyam dadami te chakshuhu. Krishna told Arjuna, I'm going to give you that vision. This necessary qualification is developed by the process of devotional service only. How pregnant are these sentences? The necessary qualification is, number one, developed. That means it's going to take time. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight. Development is gradual by definition. And it is developed by the process. That means there is a step-by-step kramataha. Kramashaha, we say. You have to go stage by stage. It is a scientific process. And it is exclusive by devotional service only. There's no other way. And that devotional service begins with hearing about the Lord from the right sources. Important qualification, Srila Prabhupada saw fit to tack on to the end of that sentence. From the right sources. The Bhagavad Gita is one of the popular literatures which are generally heard, chanting, repeated, etc., by people in general. As we know, we've already described, pretty much anyone can chant Bhagavad Gita. Yada yada hi dharmasya, who doesn't know it? Everyone. But in spite of such hearing, etc., sometimes it is experienced that the performer of such devotional service does not see the Lord eye to eye. Have you experienced this? Prabhupada says, sometimes it is experienced. But the performer of such devotional service does not see the Lord eye to eye. The reason is that the first item, Shravana, is very important. If hearing is from the right sources, it acts very quickly. Generally, people hear from unauthorized persons. Such unauthorized persons may be very learned by academic qualifications, but because they do not follow the principles of devotional service, hearing from them becomes a sheer waste of time. Sanatana Goswami has said in very strong language, Putam Harikathamritam. Harikathamritam is very pure, but Sarpotishtam Yathapayaha. If it is touched by the lips of a non-devotee, it becomes poison katha. Be careful. Here in Vrindavan, practically every day, there's some new Harikatha going on, Gyan Yagya, Sangeetamai, Rasakatha, and people are going there in droves to be entertained, basically. And the person who's speaking, he's also going there to collect some donations. So this has spoiled the whole thing, Srila Prabhupada writes earlier here in the first canto. This is a false process. The real process is to surrender unto a bona fide devotee who is defined by his own surrender to a similar pure devotee, and to hear from that person. Therefore, Prabhupada concludes here, first one should select a competent and bona fide speaker, and then hear from him. Sometimes the texts are interpreted fashionably to suit their own purposes. He's talking about the rascals again. That we see also. Even in Krishna consciousness, we have our own purposes to fulfill sometime, and we twist and twangle the philosophy or the books. It can be done. So be careful of this. This is Prabhupada's instruction here. When the hearing process is perfect and complete, the other processes become automatically perfect in their own way. These are different transcendental activities of the Lord, and each and every one of them is competent to bestow the desired result, provided the hearing process is perfect. Srila Prabhupada is making this emphasis, not me. These are his words only. I'm quoting directly. In the Bhagavatam, the activities of the Lord begin from his dealings with the Pandavas. There are many other pastimes of the Lord in connection with his dealings with the Asuras and others. And in the 10th canto, the sublime dealings with his conjugal associates, the gopis, as well as with his married wives at Dwaraka, are mentioned. Since the Lord is absolute, there is no difference in the transcendental nature of each and every dealing of the Lord. But sometimes people in an unauthorized hearing process take more interest in hearing about his dealings with the gopis. Such an inclination indicates the lusty feelings of the hearer. So a bona fide speaker of the dealings of the Lord never indulges in such hearings. One must hear about the Lord from the very beginning, as in the Srimad Bhagavatam or any other scriptures, and that will help the hearer attain perfection by, quote, progressive development, end quote. Prabhupada's words again, we've already heard them. I've already emphasized them. One should not therefore consider that his dealings with the Pandavas are less important than his dealings with the gopis. We must always remember that the Lord is always transcendental to all mundane attachment. In all the above mentioned dealings of the Lord, he is the hero in all circumstances, and hearing about him or about his devotees or combatants is conducive to spiritual life. It is said that the Vedas and Puranas, etc., are all made to revive our lost relation with him. Hearing of all these scriptures is essential. I don't think anybody can really improve on this wonderful purport by Srila Prabhupada, but just for reference and to offer respect to Swami Pad Sridhar, we will repeat what he has said. She speaks this verse, beginning Shrinvanti, suggesting the actual conclusion, the real fruit of hearing and chanting. Shravanadi phalam aha, Shrinvanditi. Nandanti means those persons rejoice with others in this glorification. Ihita means activities, Tavaka means your, and Padambujam means lotus feet. Now, he makes the point. The fact that only they see means only persons who are doing these following this devotional path. And that too, not only after a long time, but immediately, is universally applicable here in the verse. How so? Because it is there, because in this process, there is cessation of the current of mundane existence. What is that current of mundane existence? Bhava pravaha. It's like a riptide or a whirlpool that you cannot easily escape from. This world is like that vortex. It's called bhava pravaha. Very hard to escape from the strong current, especially if you don't swim. Janma paramparaya uparamo yasmin tat. But the cessation of that process of successive births, one after another, that is found in this bhakti process. So says Sridhar Swami. Jiva Goswami, again, no comment. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says this verse shows the actual reason for the Lord's appearance. They, meaning those who follow the process of hearing and chanting under good guidance, etc., and not others, Eva, they see for certain. And it's not that they do not see. They see without delay, achirena, not after a long time. What do they see? They see your lotus feet, not the lotus feet of one of your expansions. Those lotus feet destroy the influence of material existence rather than prolonging material existence. If you go to Ganesh, no offense on his birthday, Ganesh Chaturthi, Moriore, Bappa Moriore, Ganapati Enama. But he's called Vinayaka. Why is Ganesh called Vinayaka? Because he leads you in the wrong direction, my friends. Neta, Nayaka means neta, ni, ni dhatu. It means to lead someone. Vinayaka means vigata nayati. He's leading you away. What is he leading you away from? The spiritual world. If he removes, we say, Riddhi Siddhi Dayaka Subhasa, what is that? Anyway, you know, Shubhlav, these things come from Ganesh. But what happens if you have auspiciousness in the material world, if you have great gains in this material world, you become entangled within this world. That is the process. Vinayanam. Therefore, he's called Vinayaka. If you worship anyone else's lotus feet, not just, we're not picking on Ganesh, anyone else, any demigod, you will only get some limited temporary result because they're not actually competent to give more than that. They themselves are limited. They're also within the material world, very highly stationed. It's like we go and bribe the government officers. So on a cosmic level, same process is going on, but they actually cannot take us out of this world. Muktir pradata vai Vishnuhu. Only Vishnu can do that. So, therefore, the Lord's lotus feet destroy the influence of material existence rather than prolonging it. Your form is not without qualities. In order to appreciate the beauty of the Lord, 6 aspects need to be seen. Not sure what that means, frankly. Okay, so this is text number 36, very important text, and particularly Srila Prabhupada emphasizes in his purport the necessity to hear from the right sources. Not that you come to Vrindavan and you just make your way straight for Loi Bazaar and look for the most esoteric books that you cannot understand. People do that, but it's not the proper process, and neither is it suitable for spiritual advancement to go in for the infotainment venues, where you have show of tears, very artistic presentation, very clever interpretations, all these new ways of spinning the Lord's Leela. No. Just hear from the Lord himself or from his pure devotees, and that will have its effect. Now, I think it was 1969 or maybe it was 1970, I don't remember the exact date, Srila Prabhupada was in Tokyo, Japan, Janmashtami, as a matter of fact. So all the devotees were in the temple, and on Janmashtami, we all fast. So Srila Prabhupada told everyone, stay in the temple. We're going to hear from Bhagavatam. And for several hours, continuously, Srila Prabhupada read from the Srimad Bhagavatam in Sanskrit. The devotees are all packed into a hot temple room. Nobody's eaten anything. Everyone is very tired. And they're listening for hours and hours and hours to Sanskrit language from His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. And at one point, Srila Prabhupada looked up and he said, you cannot understand, but the effect will be there. I just came across a quote from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. It was an interview, I think. And there was some question of whether he should speak in Bengali or Hindi or whatever, English. And he replied, we don't speak Bengali or Hindi or English, nor even Sanskrit. we speak Bhagavatiya Bhasha. We speak the language of the devotees. That is the language that you have to hear. Very profound. In other words, when we hear from the mouth of a pure devotee, it is a transcendental phenomenon. It is not like hearing from a politician or from a scholar or from a social activist or from a poet or whatever. All the persons that we go and hear from. We should be very careful. Srila Prabhupada here says, one should first select a competent and bona fide speaker and then hear from him. Samit pani shrotriyam brahmanishtam. The person has shabde parech nishnatam brahmani upashanashrayam. These are the qualifications. The person has to be fixed in spiritual realization and spiritual activities. He has to be a surrendered Bhagavata. And that hearing will be effective. Okay, I don't want to go on too long. It's the end of the class now. But if anyone has any questions, we have finished the texts. So if anybody has any questions or any comments, we can discuss it further.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. As always, we hear the nectar from you, Prabhu, the way you chant the purport of Srila Prabhupada based on commentary and the aspect we learn, Prabhu. Prabhu, today you emphasize on this through the purport number 36, especially for the right hearing from the right source. And Prabhu, you just spoke about this when the hearing process is before that. First, one should select a competent and bona fide speaker and then hear from him. This is one part. And then the second part is when the hearing process is perfect and complete. So, Prabhu, like we see for example, in our context in ISKCON, if we have a Srila Prabhupada tapes and Srila Prabhupada disciple tapes and our spiritual masters, so we are hearing from them. So one part is at least that the competent and bona fide speaker, that part is taken care of. But second is the hearing process is perfect and complete. So from our end, what should be our attitude so that our hearing process is towards the perfection and completion?
Yes. Well, you asked for it. So I will tell you. Srila Prabhupada used to say, hearing means acting. You have to hear something, and whatever you hear, you have to actually do it. And that's not so easy. You know already. It's not so easy. It takes time. We all have extremely tough conditioning, hard shells to break through. And we hear, but we don't hear. It's like Bhagavatam says, Pasyanapina pashyati. Even they see the nature of this world, still they don't see, because the desires in the heart are so deeply rooted and so, I want to say, irrational and, stubborn, really, that we hear, but we don't follow. 90% of what we hear is gone 10 minutes after the class ends. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada used to encourage us to engage by not only hearing every single day, repeatedly, because that keeps filling it up. If we don't keep filling our heads with Bhagavatam, what are our heads going to be filled with? They'll be filled with whatever else we hear that isn't Bhagavatam. And eventually the effect of that katha will be there also. So Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Nityam Bhagavata Seva has to go on. But in addition, Prabhupada said hearing means acting. What we hear, we have to apply. And one very practical way to apply what we hear is to repeat it to someone else. Whatever you've heard, share it. Give it to someone else or many other persons. That will quickly draw the attention of the Lord, because he is very anxious to bring back all of his parts and parcels who even when presented with the opportunity of devotional service, may not take it. They have to be encouraged. Whatever help the Lord receives from the rest of us will very quickly draw his mercy to us. And if we reinvest that back into the process again, then we can make advancement very rapidly. So those are two things. One, you hear every day. Two, you repeat what you hear. But three, sooner or later, we just have to hear the instruction and we actually have to embrace it wholeheartedly and follow it strictly, permanently. And that requires a permanent change. And that is what we do not want. We are fighting. This is the problem. We actually do not want to go back to Godhead. Srila Prabhupada on at least one occasion said, most of my disciples, they want to go to Svargaloka. They don't even realize it yet. But that's actually where their nishtha lies. And those who are less fortunate than that, their nishtha lies instead in gossiping about their neighbors or, worse things. There are worse things that we can do. So one has to recognize that surrender means, why do we use the word surrender? What is that word surrender in Sanskrit? It's not there. Surrender. Why did Prabhupada use this word? Surrender means you don't want to give up something, but you do it. You do what you don't want to do. You follow an instruction you don't want to follow, and you give up doing something that you want to do instead. That's surrender. So that has to happen. Otherwise, how does the heart become pure? This process, we become purified by the fire of ordeal. Srila Prabhupada said, it is painful. Tapas, the word is used. I emphasize that Vasudeva Devaki, they performed tapasya, severe tapasya, for 10,000 celestial years. We can't even do it for a couple of hours a day. Our minds wander. So, these are three things. We have to hear regularly and just keep putting it in, because otherwise someone else is going to brainwash us. And we have to repeat what we hear, because that preaching process is very, very powerful. It very, very much grabs the Lord's attention and his blessings. And then ultimately we have to realize hearing means acting. If the speaker asks for a glass of water and you speculate that, well, milk is even better than water, so I'll bring him some milk instead. You haven't heard. You've not heard. The hearing is not so easy thing also, because our minds are so twisted by our own desires that we turn it into something else. I mean, I can give specific examples, but you can find them on your own as well. You just read Srila Prabhupada's books and open your eyes, and you will see everything very clearly also. So there's no need. I don't know if that's answering your question 100%. But
thank you so much, Prabhu. Very profound and very instructive, Prabhu. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Okay. Anything
Mataji,
else?
just unmute her.
Yeah.
Please, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, all goes to Srila Prabhupada. I was, just this whole section of Queen Kunti's prayers, it highlights the supremacy of Lord Krishna. Although she was the aunt of Lord Krishna, she preferred to reveal and kind of also revel in his supremacy as the Almighty. Why does she choose to do that? Is that for our benefit, or because she could have had this loving relationship that Yashoda had or Devaki had, but instead she chooses this other path? Could you shed light?
Well, it may look like we make our choices in life about Krishna. and particularly about Raganuga Bhakti. But they're not necessarily choices, because we all have an eternal constitution that Sthai Bhava means it's not going to change. Kunti is in that position. That is Kunti. In the spiritual world, you are your body. Only in this world, we are not our bodies. And what is your body made out of? It is made out of your Sthai Bhava. Shradhamayoyam Purusha. Your face. So Kunti Devi, that was her eternal devotional bhava. Just like Arjuna, he didn't really want to see the universal form, but he also wasn't in Vrindavan. And that was another Arjuna. There's two Arjunas. The cowherd boy is another one. But Arjuna at Kurukshetra, that is, he's acting in his element. Every one of us has a particular Sthai Bhava. So Kunti Devi, she has Vatsalya. This is the point. She's not completely unrelated to the Lord. Her relationship with the Lord is called Sambandhanuga. You can say this, at least analogously. So she's related to the Lord as his aunt. And for that reason, she does have some Vatsalya, but she has this Aishwarya Pradhan, Vatsalya. Kunti Devi. Others as well. The Vasudev Devaki, same. They had more Vatsalya. But the many devotees are like this. The devotees who are worshipping Mathuradish and Dwarakadish, they have this. Aishwarya Bhav is stronger. It's only in Brajatam that we find this Madhurya Bhav that's so completely prominent, so completely overwhelming, actually. Even Krishna becomes overwhelmed by it. So it's a very special thing. And this very confidential thing is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to teach and to share. And we're very fortunate if we can come in contact with his process. Maybe that's significant. So I don't know if that's answering your question.
Yes, thank you, Prabhuji.
All right, anything else?
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much. We are very much indebted to you, Prabhu, and very grateful to you. The way today we heard that we should select competent bona fide speaker and then hear from him. And we are so blessed that we get to hear from you, Prabhu, every fortnightly. It's our great fortune in Karinadesh, Prabhuji. We are very, very grateful to you for your time, for your association. And it's benefiting all of us, Prabhuji. So we look forward, Prabhu, for your association in the near future, Prabhuji. And all together we'll express our gratitude to Prabhu and we'll chant one time Hare Krishna Mahamantra and Vaishnava Pranam. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.